When you think of sophistry, you might think of something like this. Wait, no, not that. This. Someone using manipulative tricks to win an argument, instead of sticking to facts and actual argumentation. But although we have some idea of sophistry and what being a sophist is, I don't usually see it ever being clearly defined. Perhaps it's even used in hypocritical ways where you call someone a sophist without knowing what a sophist is. As for modern definitions, Merriam-Webster defines sophistry as subtly deceptive reasoning or argumentation. As for sophist, the MW gives a historical account of a sophist, but also defines it as a captious or fallacious reasoner. But speaking of history, why don't we go back in time in our DeLorean to ancient Greece, where these historical sophists first started showing up. But obviously a sophist is not going to admit that they themselves are a sophist, so we're going to have to find an outside source to really understand who they are and what they do. And what better person than our boy Plato, who not only dealt with sophists a lot, but wrote an entire dialogue about them. Like all of Plato's dialogues, we got a cast of characters here, but surprisingly, Socrates is not the main character. He's still in it, but his usual role is taken up by the mysterious stranger of Elea, and this stranger will be dialoguing with a character named Theaetetus. As usual, it's a back and forth mainly led by the stranger, and let me tell you guys, this gets complicated. So the basic structure of this dialogue is pretty simple. The stranger will examine an idea like rest, and then he will divide the one concept into two, like rest divides into sleep and relaxation. Then he can divide sleep into two, with deep sleeping and napping, and so on and so on. So it's a constant division of concepts into two until we get to a sophist. So we start out with skills, since sophistry is probably to be found in this area. Skill can be divided into producing things and acquiring things. Acquiring things can be divided into exchange or manipulation. Manipulation is then divided into competition or hunting. You can hunt living or non-living things, and with living things you could hunt either land or water animals. I guess they forgot about birds, although they do mention water-based birds. Land animals can then be divided into tame and wild animals, with tame animals being us humans. Now you could hunt humans using violent means, which you probably first thought about, but also through persuasion, such as winning court cases and speaking to people. I forgot to add that persuasion can be divided into being public or private, but private persuasion can be then divided into amatory and flattery. Don't worry, I didn't know what amatory is either. Amatory, as used by Plato here, refers to giving gifts to those you hunt, whereas with flattery, you receive gifts from those you hunt. And this is where our sophist lies. What must be referred to as sophistry is an acquisitive skill of hunting live land-dwelling prey, hunting humans privately for money payment, which seems to be educational and is a hunt for rich and famous young men. Now you might read this and think, well, that's kind of weird. Like, I get the money motivation part, but this whole hunting thing is a bit strange and not what I had in mind for a definition of a sophist. But not to worry, because there's actually 6 other definitions given for a sophist here describing different aspects. I know I said not to worry, but maybe learning that there are 6 more definitions is actually going to get you to worry. Not to worry though, because your pal Philosophy Tunes will get through them. And thankfully, definitions 2, 3, and 4 are kinda all together. Again, we go back to skills and acquisition, but this time instead of going down manipulation, let's go down the exchange route. Exchange can be divided into purchasing and gifts, which I forgot again, but purchasing is where our head should be at, which can be divided into barter and self-selling. Self-selling is where you sell your own products, while selling products of others is barter. Barter is then divided into retailing, which is selling inside a city, and trading, which is trading between cities. Regardless of the method, you can divide both forms of selling into the sale of things to sustain the body, such as food, water, and shelter, and sale of things for the soul, such as music, art, and knowledge. And this is what the sophist does, sell either by retail, trade, or even self-selling knowledge. Since they distinguish between retail, trade, and self-selling this knowledge, this constitutes definitions 2, 3, and 4. And so, the part of the acquisitive skill which involves exchange by purchasing, whether by retail or self-selling, in either case, whatever involves selling knowledge in this way, you would, presumably, refer to always as sophistic. Side note, I kinda hate that quote because of how many unnecessary words are there. You would, presumably, and so just get to the point, Plato. Now to definition number 5, we go to skills again, acquisition, manipulation, but instead of going down hunting, we go to competitive. Competitive gets divided up into violence, which is a clash of bodies, and disputations, which is a clashing of arguments. Disputations can be divided into public disputes, which are judicial, and private disputes, broken up into question and answer called contradiction. Now there's 2 ways to do private disputes. One is to go on ahead with no skill and the whole thing is chaotic and random. They don't give this a name, but I call it rambling. The other is done with skill, and is comprehensive, and this is argumentative. But there are 2 types of argumentative disputes, one done for money, and one at the expense of money. Random arguments you may have online are considered done at the expense of money, because you could be using that wasted time to make money. But if you're using argumentation to make money, well, that's our 5th definition of a sophist. The sophist is none other than the money-making kind, as it seems, belonging to the argumentative, contradictory, disputatious, combative, competitive skill and acquisition. Alright, so that's a lot already, but we got 2 more to go. Now at this point, Theaetetus and the stranger want to get a little bit more grounded, so they look at all these definitions they have so far and wonder what concept kind of unites them all. They agree, but don't really elaborate on discrimination. So I gotta pull up a whole new board for this because you know what's about to go down. Discrimination can be divided into purification, which takes out the bad but leaves the good of something, and something else which they don't know either. Now you could purify living things and inanimate objects. We're concerned with living things, so we'll go down that rabbit hole. You could purify the body through working out and medicine, but you could purify the soul as well. Now you could purify the soul by getting rid of the soul's vice or its ignorance. You purify ignorance by education. But education can be divided into didactic education, which is, as I read it, education by force motivated by anger. But besides this is education by refutation, taking note of the ignorant person's position and refuting it. And this is where our 6th sophist definition lies. Let there be a purificatory part of discrimination, and let us separate out the part which deals with the soul. Let education be part of teaching, and let us say that the part of education which brings about refutation of a vain presumption to wisdom turns out, in our present argument, to be nothing other than the noble kind of sophistry. Now they call this definition a noble sort of sophistry, because they aren't really positing things here, but rather refuting wrongly held positions. But here's the thing. The stranger notes that the ability to refute gives one a vibe of knowledge. They seem knowledgeable when they're able to refute things. But the ability to refute or critique doesn't necessarily carry over to the ability to posit arguments. So sophists who gain a sense of perceived intellect and superiority through the easier method of refutation are fine if they do just that. But if they take advantage of this image of themselves and exploit others, then they are a not so noble sophist. They are somehow able to arm young people with the belief that they are wiser than everyone about everything. For it is obvious that if the sophist neither contradicted properly nor gave that appearance to the young, hardly anyone would want to pay money to become their pupils in these subjects. Now if I'm being honest, after this Plato kinda wanders off topic for a big chunk of the dialogue, but at the very end he gets back on track and gives us the 7th and final sophist definition. Starting back at skills, let's go over to the production side now. There are productions of the divine, such as the things in themselves and the images of them. And there are human productions, such as actual things and images of those things. Now when you make an image, it could be an imitation of something, which is mimicry, or something else not defined by Plato, which I'm guessing would be something like creativity or originality. Mimicry, imitating something, can be done in an informed way or in an opinionated way. If you were doing an impression of a celebrity, it'd be the difference between researching the celebrity or just going off stereotypes. But if you're doing opinionated mimicry, this could be done sincerely, in which you truly believe that your imitation is the real thing and not just a stereotype, or it could be insincere, and you could secretly know that your imitation is fake and involves doubts. You could do insincere mimicry privately or publicly. Publicly, this is a demagogue or a statesman, while one who does this in private is our 7th and final definition of a sophist. It is the generation of contradictions, born of the insincere part of opinionated mimicry, which belongs to the appearance-based form of image making, derived from the part of production activity which is defined as human rather than divine and works wonders in discourse. it seems we may declare, in very truth, that this is the actual blood and lineage of the Sophist. Now that last quote makes it seem like this final definition has more weight than the other definitions, and it might, but I think it's also useful to consider the other definitions as well to determine when sophistry is going on. So hopefully with this video, this gives you a better idea of what a sophist is and how to identify them. Highly recommend you read the dialogue yourself, as I left a bunch out, but it is a chunky dialogue, so be prepared. A lot of you who watch are not subscribed, so join our cult of sophistry here by hitting that rectangle, as well as the bell button. Like the video if you enjoyed it, and I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.